Go have fun or being here with me. All right. All right. Yeah, you got to love the kids. And kids often will say funny things. They just say the most off-the-wall things, and you just love them for that. And sometimes kids they'll get angry over the silliest things. I'm talking about small children. But if they get mad about something and it's really silly and you laugh about it, or if they see you giggling about it, it makes them even more mad. So I found some quotes. These are some actual quotes from parents. Parents said things their children got mad about. One mom said her son got mad because the moon was in the sky during the day and he wanted me to put it back. One little girl got mad because her picture wasn't in her parents' wedding album. All right. His ice cream was too cold. One little boy got mad because paper towels are rectangular and not triangular. All right. One mother said, I wouldn't let him lick the meat I was defrosting. All right. And another mother said, her son got mad because I wouldn't let him wipe his nose with a piece of bread. All right. We laugh about that because it's the children get angry. They get mad about the silliest things. But if we're honest, we get angry as adults over some silly things too. Some things that are just petty. You ever gotten mad because you're on a phone call and you're put on hold for longer than a minute? And we get angry over that. Anybody got ever angry because someone in your family is eating their food too loud? Chewing their food? It happens. We get angry if someone asks a question in a church meeting, a question that was just answered, and we get annoyed. These little petty things kind of set us off. Someone's driving too slow in front of us, or they're walking too slow, and it upsets us. To be honest, we get angry over little things. But sometimes it's bigger things. Sometimes it's serious things. And when that happens, what do we do? When we really are facing something unjust. Maybe someone's insulted us. We're facing some type of opposition. And what do? Do we get angry and just blow up? Or is there a better way to do that? What I want to do this morning is I want us to kind of walk through one of the Psalms. We're going to look at Psalm 35. And as we look at the Psalm, this is a Psalm of David. And I want us to see how David handled anger. It wasn't that he didn't get angry, but I want us to see what he did to redirect his anger. Let's have a word of prayer. God, open our eyes, open our hearts to hear the truth. Your word that was written thousands of years ago, yet to see how it's so relevant in our lives today. I pray this in your name. Amen. Let's just look at Psalm 35 for a moment. And let's just look at the first 4 verses. David's words. Oppose my opponents, Lord. Fight those who fight me. Take your shields, large and small, and come to my aid. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers, and assure me I am your deliverance. Now let's just stop for a moment. We sometimes play this game of one-upmanship where we try to outdo each other in a conversation. Let me just give you an example. Let's say there's some mothers getting together and they're talking about what they did for the summer. And one mother says, yeah, we had a weekend. We took the kids off and went camping at the state park. And one mother says, well, we spent a whole week with our kids at Disney World. One-upmanship. And then there's another one that says, yeah, well, we took our kids to Europe for up 2 weeks. Always trying to find ways to outdo the other person and be better. But we also do the opposite. I'd call it kind of a reverse one-upmanship. And we as adults, we're good at this one. Someone's talking about an ailment that they had, something that they're dealing with. Oh, I'm sorry, that sounds rough. Hey, let me tell you what it was like for me. And we try to tell, I know you went on a rough route, but let me tell you how bad it was for me. And we always sound like we had something worse than what they had. It's kind of a sense of one-upmanship. We're just always trying to outdo one another. Well, I mention that because if you like to play that game, you would not want to play the game of one-upmanship with David. David, who wrote this psalm, he knew incredible opposition. He faced incredible injustice. He was always facing roadblocks and obstacles in his life. Now, obstacles can come in a lot of forms. I would, if I could describe an obstacle this way, it's just something that sort of stands in our way. It's a roadblock, but it's keeping us from what we want. It's what I want to do, and if something's standing in my way, I see that as opposition. Let me just put that in a silly way. How many of you ever gotten angry because you lost your remote, your TV remote? Don't raise your hand. But we get angry because it's not there. Why? Well, it's that remote is hiding from me, and it's keeping me from what I want to do. Channel surf. And so we look at things, anything that causes opposition for what we want, it sets us off. Well, David faced opposition on a whole different level. Now, David, before he was king, he was already slated. This is in 1 Samuel 16. He's already chosen by God to be the king. He's been anointed to be the king. Of course, there's a situation going on. There already is a king. That's King Saul. At that point, David is a young man. He's relatively unknown, but he comes up and he faces Goliath. He becomes, overnight, this sensation, this warrior. David gets into Saul's army. He becomes a leader in God's army, in Saul's army. And everything David does is done well. He is so loyal to the king. He is faithful to the king. Yet in all that, he faced opposition from Saul himself. See, Saul, I think, also knew that David was going to be the next king, and he was afraid. God had told Saul, you're not going to stand. I have chosen someone else, because Saul had started out well, but he began to be more about Saul than about what God wanted. And so he lost his rightful place, his place. And David was slated to be the next king. Well, that didn't set well. Even though David was so fiercely loyal to the king, whatever Saul sent him to do, he did it, and he did it well. But that didn't matter to Saul. It came to a point in David's life he had to run for his life. He had to flee. The very one he loved, the very one he served, he had to run from him. And so that is the context of what Psalm 35. Best we understand, David wrote this psalm at the time when he was out in the wilderness running for his life, in a sense. Excuse me. Running from Saul. And that's where we see these words. So look at this with me again. Let me start in verse 1 just again. David said, "Oppose my opponents, Lord. Fight those who fight me. Take your shields, large and small, and come to my aid. Draw the spear and javelin against my pursuers, and assure me I am your deliverance. Let those who intend to take my life be disgraced and humiliated. Let those who plan to harm me be turned back and ashamed. Let them be like the chaff in the wind, with the angel of the Lord driving them away. Let their way be dark and slippery, with the angel of the Lord pursuing them. They hid their net for me without cause. They dug a pit for me without cause. Let ruin come on him unexpectedly, and let the net he hid ensnare him. Let him fall in it to his ruin." Wow. Harsh words. This psalm is what is classified as an imprecatory psalm. We're familiar with the psalms of praise, psalms of thanksgiving, there's songs of lament, and then there's songs that are called imprecatory. And an imprecatory psalm is one where you're just asking God, just take that person and smite them upside the head. It sounds very vengeful, and they're harsh. And we don't like that. We're uncomfortable with these type of psalms because it seems so opposite of what Jesus said about loving your neighbor and being kind to one another. It just sounds so foreign to that. But before we write David off as just being harsh, vindictive, without love in his heart, I want you to keep two principles in mind as we read this. Number one, now David, again, he's talking about King Saul and his army that's opposing him with these harsh words. God, you just strike him down. But I want you to keep this in mind. David had two opportunities before him to directly kill Saul himself. He didn't do it. In fact, while he was out in the wilderness, there was one point, this is 1 Samuel 25, where David and his men are actually hiding in a cave. And Saul comes in to relieve himself, take care of nature. And David actually snuck up to him and just cut off the corner of his robe. Now, with that knife in his hand, he could have cut a whole lot more than a robe. He could have just taken care of Saul right then. He wouldn't do it. 2 chapters later, another incident. The armies are on opposite sides. David and his men, Saul's army. David and one of his servants, they actually sneak into the camp at night, walks right up to where Saul is sleeping. Could have killed him. Instead, he took his javelin. And David, so I want you to understand, who's David who's praying this prayer, God, just strike him down. In fact, some of his men thought, God's given you this chance, strike him down. But David said, let me just read this. This is from 1 Samuel 26. This is David's words as he called out to Saul. The Lord will repay every man for his righteousness and his loyalty. I wasn't willing to lift my hand against the Lord's anointed. And even though the Lord handed you over to me today, but just as I considered your life valuable today, so may the Lord consider my life valuable and rescue me from all my trouble. So David's praying this imprecatory psalm, but I want to understand his love, he is not going to take matters into his own hands. But I want you to notice something else about this. Not only did David take matters in his own hands, what he did, he took it to God. He took his feelings to God. He says, David wants Saul out of the way. He wants him out, and he's angry. I mean, just look at those harsh words. Let the angel drive them away. Let their way be dark and slippery. There's anger in what he's saying. But he's taken it to God. He hasn't taken this into his own hands to deal with. He took it to the right place. Friends, I don't want us to lose the significance of that because we get angry. It happens to all of us. But what do we do with our anger? What do we do with it? Many of us, what we do is we actually hold that anger in. And doctors will tell you that's not wise, it's not healthy. It affects us physically, and of course it affects us emotionally. We just sort of bottle it up. And if you bottle it up long enough and your anger goes deep enough, it just explodes. It affects our health, but we just all of a sudden explode on other people. You hold it in? And some of us, what we do is we share that anger. We're upset about something at work. Maybe a coworker said something. Maybe it was misunderstood. Maybe the boss said something to us that we didn't like. It makes us angry. So what do? We're hanging around the coffee pot. We're hanging around the Keurig or the water cooler, and we tell a coworker about it. And we get them mad with the boss. Or maybe there's 2 or 3 of you over lunch. And now this misunderstanding has grown between not you and the person, but that person and the office. You know what's sad is I've seen it in the church too. It happens in church. Where someone has had a misunderstanding with the pastor, they're mad about something, and instead of being biblical, Matthew 18, and going to the pastor, that individual to talk, they talk to other people. And they get the church divided over something that made them angry that they didn't seek to resolve biblically. They just shared the anger with other people. Friends, that's not the way to handle anger. The way to do it is what David did. He went to the Lord. You can feel his harsh feelings. You can feel his sentiment in this. God, take care of this guy. Get him out of the way. Remember, he took it to God. And that's where he left it. If you look at verse 9, Psalm 35. David's laid all this out before the Lord. God, you got to take care of this guy. Oppose him. But then he says in verse 9, and then I will rejoice in the Lord. I will delight in his deliverance. All my bones will say, Lord, who is like you, rescuing the poor from one too strong for him, the poor or the needy from one who robs him. His heart has a sense of, God, I'm going to trust you with this. But I want you to really understand David's heart in this. He's angry. But what makes it so hard for him is who is opposing him. These are people he deeply cared for. He really did. Let's skip down to, look at verse 11. Let's look at verse 11. Malicious witnesses come forward. They question me about things I do not know. They repay me evil for good, making me desolate. Yet when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled myself with fasting, and my prayer was genuine. I went about mourning as if for my friend or brother. I was bowed down with grief like one mourning for a mother. But when I stumbled, they gathered in glee. They gathered against me. Assailants I did not know tore at me and did not stop. With godless mockery, they gnashed their teeth at me. Do you hear? He cared for these people who are now opposing him. He said, even when they were sick, I was there for them. And he's talking about King Saul. He had a deep affection, not just because he was the ruler of Israel, not just because he was the man who put him in a place of authority, of leadership. Saul was his father-in-law. He cared for this man. Jonathan was Saul's son, and Jonathan was his best friend. He had family connections multiple ways, and he truly cared about this man. Not only that, remember, David was a warrior. Now Saul's out here with this army, and many of the people in this army were men David had served alongside. They were his friends. I can imagine when David's time when he was serving in the army, maybe there's evenings at night sitting around a campfire and just sharing stories together. Kinship, that band of brothers feeling. And he says, yet, these are the ones that are after me. And so when I have fallen, they chase after me with glee. But I was there for them. I was there. I prayed for them. And David, when he prayed, it wasn't some casual prayer like we often do, like when someone's sharing a request with us. Yeah, I'll pray for you. And we forget. And we just kind of, or maybe we just kind of a casual prayer. Notice what David did. When they were afflicted, he said, I put on sackcloth and I humbled myself. I fasted and prayed. Now, y'all know what sackcloth is. And when someone's in a Jewish setting, when they put on sackcloth, it was a sign of just their stress. And they replaced their clothes with a sackcloth. And I tell you, if you're wearing sackcloth, every time you itch, that's got to be a reminder to pray. So there's nothing casual about, oh yeah, I'll pray for you guys, and forget it. He sincerely prayed for them and cared. Yet look how he was treated. Some of us understand that. Some of us know what that's like. Someone who's a close friend, a best friend, for years, something happens, it puts a rift in that relationship. And all of a sudden that person you were so close to now considers you their enemy. And I think it's so sad how many couples there are that they'll stand in front of an altar just like this to exchange vows. And just a few years later, one of those spouses comes up and says, I just don't love you anymore, and walks out the door, leaving that spouse just devastated, blindsided, to where you were such close friends, married to one another, and all of a sudden, I don't care anymore. That's kind of a little bit what David felt. But what we often do, some of us, our tendency is when someone treats us that way, we go, okay, well, fine. You're going to be that way? I'm going to be that way right back at you. I love people, but if you're going to be that way, well, you just watch. I'll treat you the same way. That's not how David was. And that's not the life we're called to live. Jesus said these words in the Sermon on the Mount. He said, this is Matthew 5, verse 46. For if you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? But if you greet greet only your brothers and sisters, what are you doing out of the ordinary? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? What Jesus is saying, it's easy to love people that love you back. We're called to love those who oppose us. That's the biblical way. And Jesus is the prime example of that. Listen to this about Jesus, Isaiah 53. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep silent before her shearers, he did not open his mouth. Romans 5:8, for God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 12. I love this one. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For in so doing, you will be heaping fiery coals on his head. So do not be conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. I love what Paul's doing there, quoting this Old Testament proverb. Says, you really want to get back at him? Be nice to him. Because what the world does is when we are angry with people, we respond in kind. They expect us to respond in kind. If they're being mean, ruthless to us, they expect us to do the same. And when we don't do that, it irks them. Because we're really acting in a better way than they are. And it's like, as it says here, like heaping burning coals on their heads. That's what David did. He cared. He says, I care. Even though they responded to me with viciousness, God, I still loved and cared for these people. But with David, it is angry. Remember, he's taken this to God, and he's going to leave it there. Look at verse 17. Psalm 35, verse 17. Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their ravages. Rescue my precious life from the young lions. And I will praise you in the great assembly. I will exalt you among many people. Now I want you to hear David's heart in this. He's called out to God. God, these people are opposing me. I want you to do this and this and this and this to them. God, you just set them straight. But, God, I want you to rescue me. I really want rescue. See, what David's really asking more than vengeance, he's asking for rescue. I want to be delivered from this problem. And that's his heart. He's angry. He's taking it to God. He's saying, God, I want you to bring me out on the right side of this. Rescue me. And then what I really love about this is his faith and trust. He's been angry. He's given that anger to God. But notice verse 18. I will praise you in the great assembly. I will exalt you among many people. David hasn't seen the answer. He has not seen an answer yet. But he's confident. He says, God, I'm going to praise you. And as the story progresses, there's a point when you come to the end of 1 Samuel, 1 Samuel, Saul is killed in battle. He's in a battle and he dies. So you would think from David's perspective, where he's saying, God, oppose them, fight those who fight me, rescue me. You would think when David heard this news, hey, your enemy is now dead. He would go, woohoo! All right, God answered my prayer. David wept. He cried. Remember, because he loved this man. He loved Saul. He loved Jonathan. And the very people who was opposing him, he still grieved. I want you to hear the love in his heart. But in all that, even before all that happened, he's still in this position where he's in the wilderness, he's running for his life, and he says, though, I will praise you in the great assembly. I will exalt you. God, I don't see the answer yet, but I've laid my need before you. I'm trusting you to rescue me. I've given my anger to you, and I'm going to praise you. That is faith and that is trust. And friends, that's what we're called to do. We're going to have things that make us angry. It happens. It's our human nature to get upset about things. Can I ask you to do this? When you get angry, redirect that anger. Take your anger to God. Lay your heart out before him. He already knows you're angry. He knows what you're thinking. So just be honest with him. But say, God, here it is, but I'm looking to you. I'm looking to you for deliverance. Deliverance from this opposition. I would pray to God, I want you to deliver me from this harsh, bitter feeling I have toward this individual right now. God, deliver me. And in that, I will praise you in the assembly. Friends, when we live like that, the world is going to stand up and notice. When we do not let those things that anger us take over, when we do not let the anger consume us, but we turn it to Christ instead, people notice the difference. I want to know what makes you different. Would you pray with me? With our heads bowed just for the moment, I just want you to examine your own heart. Are there some things that you are upset about right now? Would you give that to the Lord? Would you confess that and just give it to Him? Are there some things that are just making you angry at work? Are you angry about something at home? Are you angry about national politics? Would you give that to the Lord? Give your anger to Him and place your trust in Him. Father, we know that anger is not a sin. It's what we do with that anger that becomes sinful or not. And Lord, help us to, in those moments that upset us, that tend us to anger, Lord, may we redirect those thoughts and those emotions to you and say, God, be my rescue. God, I will praise you in the midst of what I'm facing, and I will not let anger control me. I want you to be Lord and Master. Father, I pray this in your name. Amen. I want us to